Exactly. Greed.
Yep.
Did you guys see the 59-year-old grandpa? They said grandpa, and I always make him sound, oh, he's 59. And he was in a Walmart parking lot and he backed up and a lady went up and, I mean, it tapped it. They said that there wasn't really even a scratch, but he felt bad and he got out of the car to apologize. She jumped out of her car, shot him in the face, killed him, and she drove off.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I mean, I'm
Crazy.
telling you, don't know. And they said
It's going, people are going crazy.
Absolutely.
sure is.
So it might be a good thing that I can't get out and drive or go anyplace anymore.
Yeah, really.
I'm stuck at home.
Yeah, it's safer there, Violet.
It's a lot
Yep.
safer there.
Hey, Violet, did you have to change your CPAP machine? I saw that they were having troubles with CPAP machines.
No, I'm doing fine.
I mean, there was some kind of recall and there was a problem with them.
Oh, well, mine is so old.
That's on Zoom.
I know it's 12 or 13 years old now.
Mm.
I just get the extra supplies for it. I just got fresh ones this past week.
Oh,
Mm.
You have a
But the
brand new,
machine works great.
Oh,
you have
yeah.
a brand new machine. Don't you have a brand new one?
No, my machine is 12 or 13 years old.
I thought you just got one. You said you didn't have it.
I
Just
just bought
get
new
new-
supplies.
You have to use,
All the headgear
I-
and everything and
Oh.
and
Okay.
and
Hi,
and
Ron.
I had
water,
CPAP about 7 or 8 years ago, and every month you had to get new tubing, face mask, all of this stuff. I said, man, this is worthless. All this stuff every month you had to get.
the only thing should be replaced every month is just the nose piece and the filter for the machine.
You know, they had me replacing the tubes and everything. And I did it for about a year. Then when I got married, I said I didn't want to scare people.
Hello, Ron. Hello, Brent.
Hello.
Hello. There's Brent.
And you were, one of your programs was on, Brent, so I had to shut you off. Usually it's Daddy, but I had to shut you off this time. It's a
Oh,
lot.
abandon the meeting. Abandon the meeting. Go
All
back to
right.
the show.
It's live, so
Yeah. How's everybody?
Good.
Good.
talking about the crazy news, wild world.
Yeah. So, just the panelists are the only ones that are on right now, right? Or is there other people that are on too? Or
Could be other people watching.
Yeah, there's some on YouTube and it's on Roku and everywhere else, so.
as far as questions or whatever, then it would only come from people here, right?
Just from here, unless somebody texts me or something, but say,
Yeah.
all right, Zoom. But
Because I can put go to share screen and then go back to the PowerPoint presentation. We can walk through it a little bit if you want to do that way.
I have a question if you want to start with a question.
Sure.
I love the numbers. Not really good with figuring all that out. I was curious, did any of your calculations touch on the year 1844?
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah, there's a period of right around 1800 is very close to 1800 is 6,000 prophetic years, so 360-day years. And then in around 18, I don't have the exact date in front of me, but around 1860, 1870, whatever, somewhere in there, is 6,000 observed years, like solar years. Or so a little window there between 1800 and that hits there. But there's some things that hit right on 1844. Like you always got to remember that. One thing, who has a calculator that would volunteer to be our little mathematician today? Because I'll share how we get some of these numbers. So,
My computer right here.
okay, so let's start off with the number 6666, and the very first measurement on the Ark of the Covenant at 1.5. You see a lot of the dimensions in the tabernacle are 1.5. And you see a lot of dimensions in the tabernacle are 6, or a portion of 6. So just calculate for me right now. What is 1 divided by 1.5?
1 divided by 1.5.
0.66666666666666.
Right. Okay, so that is, so to reverse that, just leave that same number on your calculator, 0.66666, and then when you do the reverse times 1.5, you're going to get a number very close to 1, like 0.99999, whatever.
Mine came up 1.
Yeah, so which is perfect, because what that means is that 0.666 of something is the same as saying that number times 1.5 equals the whole number. So let's just say that on 6,000, like if you're going to take any time, like 6 days, 6,000 days, whatever, once that number is hit, you're on to the 7th because the 6th is finished. So for example, we take 6 days. 6 times 24 is 144 hours. As soon as you hit 145 hours, you're into the 7th day. The 7th day is 145 to 168 hours. You know, the 6th day is 120 days, or 120 hours to 144. So once you hit, so you got to remember that. So if 6,000 is the end of 6 days, then 4,000 is 0.666 of that. You know, so it's 4,000 times 1.5 is 6,000. 6,000 times 0.6666 is 4,000. So when you talk about 1,800, like remember that. So if we're taking the secular years, and you said there's 4,000 years from Adam to Jesus, exactly 4,000, like some people put in, and you added 1,800 to that, there would be 5,800 years to the year 1,800, right? 4,000 plus 1,800 would be 5,800 years to 1,800. Well, there's another number we have to consider, which is the difference between a prophetic year and an observed year. It took man a long time to figure out exactly how many days are an observed year. That's why the original calendar from Caesar, even though it was 365.225 days a year, was out just a little bit. And the Gregorian calendar tried to correct that little fragment, because if it's not exactly on, we keep going farther and farther out of season. So what's the difference between a very easy little trick that came up with, I can show you, is every 69 observed years, or 6.9 observed measurements of time, is exactly the same as 70 prophetic. I'll kind of prove that out to you, for example. So if we take, remember the prophecy of Daniel, so there's 69 sevens, whatever. But let's just take give me a number. How many observed years do you want me to see convert to prophetic years? Just someone give me a number. Any number. Ryan, tell me a number between 1 and 200, just to make it easy.
49.
What's that?
49?
49, okay, so if I take my calculator, I go 49, divided by 6.9 times 7, because there's always a difference between 6.9 and 7. So 49 observed years would be 49.710149 prophetic years. Let me give you a good one. Let's do 48.3, or let's say 483. Remember, Daniel's prophecy 69 times 7. So 483 divided by 6.9 times 7 is exactly 49. So in other words, there's exactly 490 prophetic years in 483 observed years. And how does that work out? Well, just think about this, for example, 360-day year versus a 365 point something day year, right? So if I just take 360 times 70, I get 25,200 days. Now, if I divide that by 69, I get 3625.2173913, which is exactly 18 minutes short of a complete year. 18 minutes, 365. And so it's more precise than most of the calendars, right? Anyway, so every because there's an extra, every year there's an extra 5.2 days between an observed and a prophetic. So if I go 5, so in 2 years, it'll be 10 days difference. But it's ironic that exactly at 69, every 69th year, there's enough of those 69 times 5 point whatever equals exactly another 360 days. So it sounds like a lot, but if you practice it on a calculator, you can take any number. So let's just try one more time. So let's say you want to figure out 2,300 prophetic days. Let's say 2,300 prophetic days. So 2,300 times, or no, we're going to convert prophetic into observed years. So 2,300, so we always divide the prophetic by 7. Then we times that by 6.9. That'd be 2,267 observed years equals 2,300 prophetic years. So when I say 1,800, so if I go 6,000 prophetic years, 6,000 times 6,000, and if I so I divide that by 6.9, which is the observed years. Or sorry, I'm going to go from prophetic to observed. So I go 6,000 divided by 7 times 6.9 equals 5,914 years. So 5,914 observed years is the same as 6,000 prophetic. In my timeline that I showed you, I said that 27 AD was 4,140 years. And we know that there was no 0 between 1 BC and 1 AD. So there's 26 years to 27 AD. So that means there's 4,114 years would be creation. You know, people say creation is 404 BC or whatever. So that really means creation is 4,114 BC. So if I take 5914 minus 4114, it's exactly 1800. So exactly 1800, our secular time now on the Gregorian calendar, exactly 1800 would be 6,000 prophetic years. If I take 6,000 observed years, 6,000 minus 4114 be 1886. So 1886 would be exactly 6,000 observed years. So you have this difference of 86 years between prophetic and observed. And of course, events happened in the church in 1886 and you know, in that time period where, but that window would be so if God was going to do something at the end of the 6th day, at the start of the 7th day, remember 6,000 is the end of the sixth day. So 1886, the day is already over, you're already on the seventh. So just prior to that last tick, 1844, that's only a difference of 30, 40 years, which is like one tick on the clock, you know? And so when you're trying to figure out, like when we're talking about the end times and about the tabernacle structure, the time between Jesus' birth and his resurrection was, approximately 33 years, so if that's the 4,000 year period, what would the window be in the 6,000 year period? It will be 1.5 times that. So 33 times 1.5 is 49.5 years. And so there's a window where if I say, okay, this is the last tick of the clock, this is a time period that's exactly like when Jesus came first time. You can only ever get as close as 49 years to when the intent. So you know the generation. You wouldn't know the time or the day or whatever, but you would know in that generation, the last brick should be laid, the capstone. And so when people talk about these timelines of 2027, 2031, they're forced to because they're saying that exactly 4,000 years was the baptism of Jesus, or exactly 4,000 years was the crucifixion of Jesus. So that means 2,000 years. You got to, we go to 2027 or 2031, but it can't go beyond that because, I mean, some people say 33 AD, for Jesus. And based on solar eclipses and different things that happen during, the crucifixion, it's got to be in 31 AD or 33 AD. So the longest you could push it out, if you're just going to say, look, I believe that Jesus is going to come at the end of the sixth day, the very first stroke of the seventh day, that would be somewhere between 2027 and 2033. So you got a window there of 2027, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 30. So you got a 7-year window that would be, depending on how you reconcile time, exactly like that. But if you took different events like the birth of Jesus times 1.5, if it was around 4 or 5 BC, then that would fall in the next 20 years. And so there's a whole bunch of things we haven't talked about, but in general, any one of these timelines that say, and people argue about, oh, it's 4,000 years, it's 4,004 years, it's this, that, it's kind of a waste of time because you're arguing against each other, believing in the same concept that that it's a 7-day pattern, that Jesus came on the fourth day or the end of the fourth day, beginning of the fifth day, that he'll come on the seventh day, and the seventh day is already in place. People that claim a 4,000 year baptism or birth are saying it's not 6,000 years yet. 6,000 years will be, on 27 AD or whatever. So it doesn't really matter. In the end, who cares? No one's going to get a little cookie for saying, okay, you were right. Now it's 6,000, or, you were right because 6,000 was 100 years ago. What that means is that we're all in agreement on something. We're all in agreement that this pattern, which was given in the tabernacle, which one of the first things given in that was how you're supposed to measure the people and how they worship, was that everything has happened on this type of pattern. We see that the flood 1650, like if I go to my chart, let me just, I don't know if I should do.
I've got a question about your calculations right there. And it's not the big question. Like I said, it's not a big deal. But way back in 2016, when you were at Terabella the first time, off the record, we talked, and I asked you about the end of the calculations. And at that point, you told me you thought it was 2030. And I don't know how you got that. I just, you said keep your mouth shut, and I have till now.
Yeah, I said somewhere between 2030 and 2046.
Is that what it was? Well, you just told me 2030.
Yeah. And the reason why is because I'm focused on the purpose. If we know that the Lord's coming, and we know that the Elijah generation, then I want to show people from the tabernacle that the supernatural truth about God, and so to me, it doesn't matter, and and I told you out of trust or whatever of a thought I had. I've kind of refined it a little bit since then, not far off, but very close sort of thing. But I really believe, I know for sure that anytime from today, even from anytime from 2024, but more particularly from 2027 on, there's a period of 69 years. 49 of that is a true jubilee. So there's a period of 20 years and then 49 years. There could be any time in there based on everything that's happened in the past, based on everything. But it won't go beyond that, because there's no other number in the tabernacle. You've constructed the entire tabernacle. There's no number beyond that, and so you can't add a number and come up with some number later on or whatever. Just like no matter what you do, you're going to come up with that 140. Like there's 46 boards. There's this. You're going to come up with that number in the tabernacle. Someone may not like it. They may not like the fact that, but that's the truth. That's the number is there. And when you were multiplying 1.5 or 1.5, 2.5, those are the numbers you're always going to come up with, because it's just math, But it's profound that, and when we talk about the timeline, I did a timeline. The next thing I said I want to kind of put this into a book or something, is because the timeline that I came up with isn't just, oh, Brent wrote some scripture and came up with this timeline. I bet you that there's about 10 different academic white papers, from Jewish, from secular, from even, from Christian, white paper documents about the biblical timeline that have been done in the last 10 years that all come up with that number. And not only that, to come with the number, it's the only number that works where you don't have to change anything about the kings or about judges or about when like if you take Ezekiel and the Jubilee, and like all the numbers work. In fact, one of the white papers that I read was by an Egyptologist who, because there's always all this disagrees with the Egypt record or put him in this pharaoh or whatever. They've actually changed Egyptologist changed the Egypt numbers to match the biblical numbers because they were far more accurate. It was like, oh, these Egypt numbers are off by a couple hundred years, not the Bible numbers,
Wow.
So, and these are white papers, people that are getting they have their doctorates or educational. What's that? So it's, but so having said all that with the timeline, I still am more reliant on the prophetic tabernacle than I am on those timelines. So that's why I don't really care whether it was 4,000 years or 4,004 or 4,100, because I know times 1.5 is 6,000. And I know that 6,000, if it hasn't already come, it comes by 2027, or 2031. And I know that's what the whole tabernacle is about. There's two things on the most on that Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat. One is the atoning sacrifice, but two is the result of that when that high priest takes off those bloody rags and puts on his robes of beauty and exits and goes before the people, not as the servant that went in there, but comes out with his royal robes, blesses the people, and the atonement is complete. They know when they see him, the atonement is complete, and that that crown event, and so other than that, the that's the only time that furniture is used. But let me just do share screen here for a second. See if I can.
Another question with what you're talking about with the Jubilees.
Yeah.
Have you somehow figured out when the Jubilees started or what the cycle is? Because it seems like everybody has a different thought on Jubilees.
Yeah, and see, that's where the major things you're going to hear about that is, so first of all, they were told to start the Jubilee as well as start keeping Pentecost only once they entered the land that God had given them.
Right.
So, so that's why it's kind of you get, depending on these timelines, you can get different years, but basically, because of archaeology and stuff like that too, it's getting boxed in more and more, so that people used to be able to say, well, the temple just, like, for example, in the Jewish timeline, they said there's 490-year difference between the Babylonian destruction of the temple and the Roman destruction of the temple. And that was said for over 1,000 years. But as archaeology started to dig things up, and we know now that it was 586 BC or 587 in that time frame, in 70 AD. So a lot more than 490 years. You got 586 plus 70. Well, that boxed that number in, so that right there's well over 100 years that the Jewish timeline must be off, which the Jewish scholars acknowledge that it's off. They call it the missing years. We talked about that in one of the earlier presentations. So that's why they're short of 6,000 years. They cut off over 160 years and different things. So to answer your question is, the Jubilee would start either as soon as they entered the Promised Land that year, or at the latest, it would start a few years later, because of the scripture with Caleb, where he's talking about getting his inheritance. And he says, when I was, 40 years old, I entered, into the wilderness. I was promised this land. And now here I am, 85 years old. So it's 5 years after the Exodus that he gets his land. So did everybody get their land at that time? Was he the last one to get it? Was it as soon as they entered? So there's a very narrow window of 5 years. So that's where you get that difference between 27 and 33 and stuff like that. So basically, from that year, then every year, it's every 49 years, and the 50th was supposed to be hallowed, where there's a big this thing that's gone on for thousands of years, even between the Jewish rabbis and the Talmud or whatever. Is it like the Sabbath, where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's just consecutive, So is it 49 years? Is the next year the first year of the next 49 cycle, or is it the 50th? And then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the majority now say it's 49 and then 50, and then you start over again. However, that doesn't mean the majority is always right, So when you take, if you count it consecutive, then 49 years, then it's Jubilee. Another 49 years would be 98 years. But if you said it's the 50th year, is how, then you go 49 plus 1 is 50. Then another 49, that'd be 99 years. So every Jubilee that you add, you're another year out. So that's why there's always an argument about it's the 70th Jubilee. No, it's the 72nd Jubilee. So if you keep things really simple, 1406, would be the year that they entered, the land. 14, somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years would be when Caleb got his land, or whatever. So if you take that, Jesus was born somewhere, between 4 and 6 BC. Well, 1406 minus, so 1400 years is 800, or is, so 1400 divided by, so we just divide that number by 4950. So 1400 divided by 50 would be 28 Jubilees exactly between then and the birth of Jesus. If you go by 49, then it falls on an odd day. So 1400 divided by 49 is 28.571 Jubilees. So somewhere around when Jesus was 12 or something years old would be the next Jubilee. So it kind of falls into the middle there. So again, you have this difference between 49, 50, and you have, arguments either way. What's interesting is, so if I take that year exactly 1406, and I take, so let me just do something for a second, 2027. Okay, sorry. 42. Oops, so 42 times. $2,000, 2003. Yeah. So if I take, so 2027 would be, what is the difference divided by 2027 would be 3,430 years exactly from the time from the year that they did the Exodus. 3,430 years. So we take 3,430, and if you divide it by 49, you get exactly 70. So it's 70 times, and of course 49 is 7 times 7. So it's 70 times 7 times 7, 3,430. If you divide it by 50, then it's 68.6. And 68.6 means it's kind of falls in the middle there or whatever. But what's interesting about that number is that a little while later you hit 69, and 69, I've shown you observed years, is exactly 70 prophetic years. And there's just as much justification for that time frame, and that would be being 50 years, which the majority say it should be 50, not 49. But that would be like a 20-year period. So 20 years from now, you know, um, would be that using 50-year period. So there's this window that starts in 2027 that can't go any longer than 2096 because of a whole bunch of different reasons. It's just you can't make it farther than that. So somewhere in that window, the Lord is, the Lord's going to return. And 69 years, what's interesting about that 69-year period, that is somewhere in that period, is that 69 observed years is 70 prophetic years. So somewhere in that 69-year observed 70-year prophetic period, beginning in 2027, is the last tick of the clock. When would Jesus come? Well, this is a herald event, heralding trumpets, trumpets were the first of the seventh month, the beginning of the seventh month. When Jesus was born, the angels heralded his birth. When Jesus began to speak in his first public speaking at the synagogue, he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach for liberty, set free the captives." Well, that wasn't a Jubilee year that year. It could have been at his birth, depending whether he was 49 or 50. He could have been born exactly on the Jubilee, or he could have just been proclaiming that he is the Jubilee. But either way, the trumpet events were always earlier, not later. So if you're going to take a wild guess as would it be earlier in that 69 cycle or later in that 69 cycle, you would guess earlier because it's a trumpet event. They're supposed to blow the trumpet on the Day of Atonement. The only time the Day of Atonement they ever blew a trumpet was on the Jubilee. It was to pronounce the end of the 49th and the beginning of the 50th all at the same time. And it was to set everybody free. It was a royal Sabbath Jubilee. It was 7 times 7 times 7. And that year, the land was to rest, everything was to rest, and so that's when we rest in Jesus and his work and everything else. So it's more than likely to be earlier in that period than at the end of the period, because the seventh, once once it hits 69, even if it was 68.6 or 69, that day is over, and now you're in the 70th. And when you read Revelation, it says, when the angel seventh trumpet was about to sound, this is when all this stuff happens, this last call. But when it sounded, it's over. When the seven thunders uttered their voices, it's already over. There's a little window when they're about to do this, when John's supposed to eat the book, evangelize one more time, observe the tabernacle, do all this sort of stuff. So there's a little window. And right now, you and I are living in that little window. Is that little window 3.5 years? Is that little window 20 years? Is that little window 69 years? We don't know, but we know that there's people that you and I know that even if they're babies today are going to be, it's this generation will see the return of Christ. It could be that we all see it, either way, if we die tomorrow, we're still going to, we're still going to see, see the truth, but all these people that want to argue about this time or that time, whatever, maybe in the past it was okay when, but now that we're getting to this time, I just try and push it away and just go, you know what, I don't care. If it's 2027, or the timeline is 4,000 years or 44, but I think you'll see as things become clearer. And I've only done one presentation on the return. I haven't even hit all the reasons why it gets clearer and clearer and clearer of when that'll be. But because I'm just trying to show what generation, and that it's our generation, and that we are the seventh generation of the book of Revelation. We are the Enoch generation. 2096 is exactly 6210, which is 10 times the period of when Enoch lived, so that would definitely be the end, but when Christ came, that was 6 times 6666 times 621, and he was the seventh generation. So there's a window, and this ties in with Ezekiel, Enoch, Elijah, like Moses, like they're I'm on the share screen right now, right? So let me just show you something. We'll go to the
What
end
about
right
those
here.
that say the 7,000th year will be in heaven? If we're
What's
already
that?
in it, what about the people that say the 7,000th year will be the 1,000 in heaven, that Jubilee? That's
Yeah,
not
but
gonna happen.
okay. So what is the
Yeah.
7,000th year? Well, 7,000 would be the end of the seventh. It'd be the eighth day. The seventh day starts in 6,001. The seventh day ends on 7,000. Like, just look at a 7-day week. When does the seventh day start?
But we've already started the
So,
7,000, you said, so.
well, six times 24. Just take your calculator out. 6 times 24 is what? It's 144. 724 is what? 168. So the seventh day begins 145 and it ends 168. So people say, well, 7,000 is the number. 7,000 is the end of the seventh day. It's, you're starting the eighth day, so we will be in heaven 7,000 year. Definitely,
No,
and if you take, for example, we haven't talked about the tribulation and that time too, and prophetic years, and I mean 1,000 prophetic years is different than 1,000 observed years, so that's a shorter time period, the prophetic years.
7,000th year. We're
What's
already
that?
we've gone through 6,000 years. So it's starting and we're already in the 7,000th, not 7,000, 7,000th
We
year.
started
That's what
the
we're-
seventh day somewhere between 1800 and 1886.
Right. That's
We
probably
s-
why she said he could have come. But what I'm saying is we're not there. So what about when she and others say the Jubilee in 1,000 years? When the world is 7,000 old, well, we're already in that beginning of that 7. So that's not gonna happen either.
We're not, though, because think about it. we'd only be at observed years 96 years, or sorry, 69 years. We'd only be at 6,210 observed years. So how much short of that of 1,000? That's over 800 years short of 1,000. But now if you compare observed years to prophetic years, and it was cut a little bit short, by the 7,000 year, that could be after the 1,000 years. Like, so there was 7,000 could still be a very significant number for after after the 1,000 years and that judgment could start, like
Yeah,
Jesus
but
returns.
that 1,000 years may not be exactly 1,000 years.
Yeah, for example,
I'm lost. Oh, well.
let's just say that it was earlier, so that in 2027, somewhere in that 20, well, let's just use it doesn't, even if we use the longest number. So 6,210 minus 7,000 is 790 years. Okay, 790 divided by 6.9 times 7. That's 891 prophetic years. So about 900 prophetic years would be, the year 7,000. And so
Years ago
we,
then.
so what, it's something where we have to take it one bite at a time. Like the you can't, if people say, oh well, I'm disappointed because um Jesus hasn't come, or remember Peter like scoffing, where is he coming, whatever. it, you can't put your head in the sand. There's the timelines with Usher, the timelines with others, they've been proven wrong. Not that there was any bad intent there, but you can go right to where he missed this, he missed this, he missed this. He had 4,004 years, not at the baptism or the resurrection, but as pre-creation. You know, it's funny, people they say, well, Ellen White said, 4,000 years Jesus came, and so it's exactly 4,000 years. I showed earlier on that she made 9 statements. The statements that she made up until 1888 favored a shorter timeline. After that, till 1915, they favored a longer timeline. And so people try and pull out this thing. So she says exactly, well, God said to Abraham, your descendants will be in a land of servitude for 400 years. And then Moses says exactly 430 years from the time that Israel entered there. Well, does that make God a liar? Because it's
Well,
400 years versus 430? The
Brent,
point of it is they were in there 400 years. That's go ahead.
I went and made I'm talking about Mrs. White when she said something like one of the times she said that was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem was 40 years after.
Right.
And that she put in their writing, and they went and changed it to 39 years.
Yeah.
Or it was actually 39 years. And so they changed it to about 40 years.
Right.
When we look at that, we look at things exact. They may not be completely exact.
But
Right.
he's talking hundreds and hundreds of years. I thought we were at almost 6,000 years. And you said that it was over that, we're already in the 7th. So the 7th, we're supposed to be Jubilee and in heaven. So
No, Sandy,
something,
but you keep missing this point. I'm saying the 7th already, the 7th day has already started, but it hasn't ended. The
I thought
7th day,
it
so
was gonna be.
let's just say, okay, but just hold on for a second. So if a year is for like 1,000, if a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day, how many years is one day? 1,000, right? If that's what we're going basing on. So the start of the day can be 1,000 years difference between the end of the day. It's still the seventh day.
It's not encouraging, but okay.
So what I'm saying is we started the seventh day. We're a long way from finishing the seventh day. And I think that's the two different things, is that the start of the seventh day is when he comes for us. The end of the seventh day is the final judgment. The final,
But
that's after the 1,000 years.
so we're not gonna be there 1,000, so I'm just going by what everybody always says, and it's just
Yeah, but
confusing.
it's up to us to,
It could be a long time, and I don't know.
well,
Anyway,
do you agree that there's that when we come, that there'll be 1,000 years before, or that general timeline that we're with Christ in heaven um before the end, or what do you believe?
well, that's what it says, so that's what I thought, but
Yeah,
it's
so
already,
I believe the same thing. So
so we're gonna end up leaving heaven to come back down here in the 8,000th year, in the eighth day.
no, not necessarily, because 690, observed is 70 prophetic, and so and it says the time could get cut short, blah blah blah, because who knows what happens on the earth once you remove God's people and God's protection. Who knows what's going to happen in that 1,000 years, or whether 1,000 years is going to get shortened to 900 years. You got to remember one thing too, is that, for example, um, there's a remnant, and a remnant is always 10%, you know, and God, and I'll show you that in a whole other presentation of when these events happen. How come they appear to be the ninth instead of the 10th? Why the ninth time? Like, instead of the 10th? Well, 10% is always, a remnant, right? And so 1,000 years, is, well, Christ could fulfill 100 of those years himself. Like, it could be like a remnant, or the church could, or whatever. So it's 900 years, So anyway, I don't want to get into, I mean, there's a whole bunch of, I like to do things sort of in a presentation about a specific thing, So if I look at, so these timelines that we've talked about, because that's what I'm trying to do a question and answer on, is, but if you look at these past times here, and you look at, so these are when things, happened or whatever, but look at what they all have in common. So 621 years. What is that when you divide it by 69? And I just want to show you something on, like, so Sandy, what's 621 divided by 69?
I don't know.
What's that?
Divided by what?
By 69 years. So I'm looking at exactly when Enoch was born. 621 divided by 69.
9.
9,
9, right?
yeah,
9.
So it was 969s, not 10, 969s. So take 1,035 years. So take the time between Enoch and the ark. So 1,035, divide that by 69.
15,
15. And what's 9 plus 15? It's 24. It's like a 24-hour day, right? But it's 69. So notice the 1,035 is divided by 69, and it's divided 15 times. So 1656 divided by 69. Did you do that, Sandy?
Do what? I'm trying.
1656
24.
divided by 69 is 24. Just like a 24-hour day, just like 6.9 days. 6.9 times 24 hours is 165.6 hours. Like an hour, like, so we're taking a day times 1,000, whatever. So but it's all divided by 69. But we know that 69 observed years are the same as 70 prophetic years. So what is 165.6 divided by 6.9 times 7, 168. It's exactly 168. So in other words, 7 prophetic days is 6.9 observed days. You'll notice that all of these numbers, 621, 135, 1656, 2580, 931.5, 621, 1, they're all divided by 69. And now I want to show you something kind of special. 621 years is the first block here, right? The second's 1035, right? Years? Can you see that, Sandy?
Mhm. I'm
The first
trying,
timeline of this is really important. So we're going to do this really slowly. From Adam to Enoch, 621 years. From Enoch to Noah to the flood, 1035 years. But all of these numbers are times 1.035. So for example, 600 times 1.035 is 621. 1656 divided by 1.035 is 1600. All of these numbers are divided by 1035, and there's a reason why. Take 6.9 and divide that by 1.035, and you get 666666666. So this Enoch being born wasn't born in 600. He was the 7th generation. He was born 621. The year 2096 is the end of that as far as it could go, because that's 6,210 years. That would be, and that's like I said, so that's like the 70th generation type thing. But I don't want to get into like there's a period of time that starts in 2027 and can go to 2031, 2033, anywhere in that time frame where it would be exactly 1.5 times when Jesus came the first time. And when all of these numbers, like from the tabernacle, like for example, we said the mercy seat is 1.5 times 2.5. But the height of the ark where the crown is, that's another 1.5. So you have 1.5 times 2.5 times 1.5, which is 3.75. And I'm not going to get into it right now. The long story short is that when you know that you're in a generation, you're born into a generation where all the generations before, like when you look at this timeline here. So 621 years in the first timeline is Adam to Enoch. In the second timeline, it's 931.5 years from the flood of Noah to Moses. That's exactly 1.5 times the first time. So what's 621? So that's 621 times 1.5. 621 times 2.5 is 1552.5. Well, that's exactly the number of years between Moses and 27 AD. So you have 1.5 and 2.5. What's interesting is from Moses to the birth of Moses to the birth of Elijah is another 621 years. So this 15,525. And then from Elijah to 27 AD is 931.5. Is someone saying something? I can't hear whatever is that.
No, some noise in the background that's just showing up on his.
Okay, so look at the perfection here from 621, 1035 931 and a half, 621, even this 1035, you know. So what's 1035 in the first period times 1.5 is again 1552.5. So so the first half is 621 and 1035 equals 1656. The second is 931 plus 1525 is 2484. But it's all this is 1.5 times 2.5. Every one of these people were born or had their ministry directed at that time. And so if we're born in the last 69 years of generation, then that's a pretty special time that we're born into. We're born into a time of seeing the return of Christ, whether we physically see it or not, but our generation. So George and Barb, did you have a question or?
I mean, we were muted, but I said, so how do you know when the generations start?
How do you know when what generation starts?
Any generation,
Well, when someone's born.
okay? So I was born in 1950. Is that the start of a generation?
That'd be the start of your generation, yeah.
And
And
how long does my generation last?
what's until you die?
Okay. But
So,
that just means if you say you were in the last generation, that could be anybody's lifetime.
no, not at all. Because if I was going to be, so if someone was born, if someone died or was, if I'm going to be born in your generation, then once you die, then I'm not, it's like, I mean, I missed it. You know what I mean? Like the best way to explain it is that there's a, there's if I'm let's talk about the generation when Jesus ministered on earth. So everybody born between 4 BC and 33 AD would have been born in the generation that witnessed Jesus. You know, not all of them would have lived. Some of them might have died in between that time. Some of them might have died in 25. Like for example, John the Baptist died before seeing the resurrection of Jesus, but he was born. He lived in that generation. Doesn't mean that he got to see Jesus. He himself be resurrected, but he lived in that generation. He was part of that. He was not just part of that calling. He was that calling. He was that Elijah. He fulfilled his mission. Jesus said, "There's nobody um, greater than John." You know, so I'm not saying that we'll all see Jesus come. I'm saying we're living in the very last generation that will exist before Jesus comes, and that generation is a period of 69 years because it's the last part of the tabernacle numbers. Can't get any more than what they are. So could it be earlier? Yes. Could it be in the next couple of years? Absolutely. Could have been before. Yeah, it could have been before too, but God chose this particular time to say, okay, this is the last. And so it's not a year about it's not about date setting. Okay, it's going to be exactly 2027. It's about appreciating that we're part of a generation that and part of it's about going to the Bible and studying these things, not thinking we know it all and not willing to accept any new lights and because whatever we receive we can share and we can use to show other people that say, oh, the Bible's not true, these timelines aren't true, these people never wrote the prophets and never. The more that I study in here, what the blessing to me is that I could sit and talk to anybody now about the biblical criticism and all the other sort of stuff because I've seen through all these white papers and like that they're all falling apart. All these past criticisms of why this guy didn't write or why that guy wasn't, why there's 5 different authors for Moses or whatever. Those are all falling apart now because of other archaeological things that are happening and other things that have that they're becoming very, very weak arguments. The Bible is continuing to be stronger and stronger that no, Moses wrote this. Like they've already eliminated about 5 things that in the past 20 years they said this proves that Moses didn't write it. They've had to eliminate those now. Now they're down to a very narrow list of why they think there's more than one author or whatever. It's pretty amazing actually. But you know, um, it's we all want the same thing, I assume that we want to see with our own eyes, if we could, the return of Jesus. We
Well,
want
let
to
me
be with him.
ask, when you
And
say that, when you say 27, to you, it's the 70th Jubilee? Is that, there's a 49 and then 50, and then the next one is a Jubilee, even though it's the first or second or whatever it is? Is
Yeah.
this the big one on 70th, or is it just a regular 7 times 7 times 7, 49, 50 Jubilee?
no, this one's special no matter what. This
Okay,
one's
so
very special. It's either the 69th or the 70th. Either one is very special. Because remember, when you're finished one, you're announcing the other, you're heralding the other. So it's the 69th, then it's heralding the 70th.
so
If it's the
27,
70th, then it's heralding, the the 71st, I guess. But so some people most of the people that say 2027 believe it's the 72nd Jubilee. And they believe that because they've had to crunch the timeline down to 4,000 years exactly to 27 AD or 31 AD. So whenever you crunch things, you got to move the furniture around in the house so that the numbers end up there. And it's not because someone's trying to be deceitful. They just are going by other timelines or whatever. But it doesn't matter. Even if it was 72nd. Well, 72 is an important number, as well. So whether you want to call it 69th, 70th, 71st, 72nd, that takes care of all the different biolines. But you're either, the worst case is it's the end of the 69th, and the other extreme is it's the 72nd.
so
But
when
you're in
would
the
be,
70s. What's that?
when would be the next one? 27 plus 7 years?
It would be 49 years or the 50th year. So, but um, once like, just give you an example, like the if it was 50-year, periods, not 49, then Jesus would be, born on a jubilee, you know, a special jubilee, the 28th jubilee, 7 times 4. And if he was born on the jubilee, then did he do his work right away? Well, no, it was 33 years before he accomplished everything. So he didn't complete his work on a jubilee, but he was born, uh, uh, so just because it's the like his work for his return, guaranteed, the Holy Spirit, the latter rain, all this sort of stuff. You got to be nuts not to think that something special wouldn't begin to happen in 2027. That the power, the last call, and whatever God has planned for that there could be tribulation, could be, whatever. What I'm saying is that I think that people will unite more. These variances would say, oh no, it's got to be 2027, there's got to be this, will more converge and go, you know what, we're all in agreement that we're at the 7th day. Whether, the 6th day is ending or has already ended and we're about to enter the 7th day. It doesn't matter to me what someone believes in that regard.
What about
But
Mrs. White says that and I mean, I've told people that I don't necessarily agree with how they see it. Something about Mrs. White says, and then things happen and he comes and the Jubilee begins or something. And everybody thinks that it has to be a Jubilee. And I'm like, well, that just means freedom.
Right.
But they take it as literal. So that means he has to come and we have to go to heaven on a Jubilee. And I think that's where a lot of people get it. And I'm like, well, but
Well,
just because it's a Jubilee, that's freedom.
right.
So I don't know how to explain that to them, because if it is in 70, is it, and it's at 27, then
Yeah,
means
but
he would have to come.
here's the difference. It could very well be on a Jubilee. But what if it's the 50th, not the 49th, that you're supposed to count? And you can Google it yourself. You can Google it and say, is the Jubilee the 50th year or 49th? How do you keep consecutive Jubilees? And you'll see all the arguments back and forth and saying no one can positively say it was one way or the other. And the reason why is because they really never kept it. They're supposed to keep it, but they
Yeah.
never really kept it. They never really observed it. And they figured out all kinds of ways to get around it. So they wouldn't have to give back land, or they wouldn't have to give back slaves. So they never really kept it well enough. Um, Unlike the Sabbath, but they still made all those rules for the Sabbath or whatever. But the the point is that if someone's wrong and 2027 is not the Jubilee year, or not it's still an important date for other reasons. But using the 50th, it'd be somewhere within that 20-year period. So you cannot, because the Jubilee is 49 or 50 years. And I'm telling you, there's a window that begins in 2027 to 2096. That's 69 years long. And this isn't from anything but out of the tabernacle. So if we took the Jubilee at 49 of those years, well, that'd be 20 years from now. It would be a Jubilee. So 69 minus 20 is 49. So you'll drive yourself crazy, and you argue about things that don't matter to say, is it definitively 2027? Or it could very well be prepared. But at the same time, why would that make a difference to your life? If you really believe he's coming and you really believe it's the last generation, then you want to be found working. That's the main point. You want to be found working, not sleeping, not running, I mean, being part of, like, like what did John do? What was John doing? He was baptizing. He was
Well,
preparing people for the
we
Lord.
are supposed to be watching.
Yeah, and we are supposed to. That's why I can never figure out when someone says.
27
That's why
and 31 years.
that's
So
why I can never figure out when a church says we believe in prophecy, but then they say don't try and determine what date Jesus is coming, which is the most natural thing in the world. Not what date, but is he coming soon? Everybody that loved Jesus, all the disciples, said, "When are you returning?" You know, they loved him. When are you coming back? So, and he didn't rebuke them. He said, watch and pray, because
there are
I've given you
people,
signs.
I get a lot of people that write and call, and some of them basically argue with me because I tell them that we will not know the exact year. And they're like, yes, we will, because God told Noah 120, and he told this and that. I'm like, did he tell him it's 120 years? And I don't really read that in the Bible, but they insist that God tells them and that he has told us we will know the exact year.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel guilty that I don't, because I'm like, I really don't know. I mean,
So
I
here's the
know.
thing, Sandy.
I think the correct thing with Noah, it took him 120 years.
Well, God said 120 years.
I don't think he told him 120 years. I think it took him 120 years. God knew how long it would take him. I don't know if he actually knew.
God said something about 120 years. I give them 120 years for their life or something. And I read, I was like, but that's not saying that the exact year. I don't know, but people argue and they use that and they say, yes, he does. And that gentleman that wrote that book
But
insisted
Sandy,
God me.
we know that there is an expectation of the Messiah at around the time of Jesus. It says it throughout, Did now if they were counting, that Jesus, if they were counting exactly from that decree, and they knew when that decree was, they would be saying, okay, 27 AD, that's a good number. But they wouldn't have known that 30 years earlier than that, he was already there. He was born, he was heralded. They wouldn't have known at 12 years old, he was already in the temple teaching. He was already there.
I
And
agree.
they
I
own,
just
so what I'm
insist.
saying is when you have this timeline, what is the event? They didn't know that the event would be the baptism of Jesus. And when John was preparing for him, he only knew that he was to baptize the one that was coming after him, but he didn't know the events. And sometimes people try and think that we have to defend something that we don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know. All that I do know is that when I compare everything, look at this chart I'm showing you. This chart isn't something that existed. I mean, I put this together from the tabernacle and from Talmud. All I can
And I,
tell you is that in a
I
very exact and specific way, God really, all these people that are so important, like they're related. Like Enoch, he was taken without seeing death. Noah, he was, it was the flood. It was the new generation. Moses, they're all keepers of the covenant. Elijah, he's the one that, God took as well. That Elijah, Moses were the two witnesses, and they all were very specific times. And God's trying to show us, these very specific times. I see you taking a picture of my chart. Uh, uh. I'll give you, I'll give you copies of it anyway. So
Yeah,
uh,
I need to see some of this in front of me to
I know
really.
that's why I was telling Sandy before that I want to do that, put it into a book, and I'm going to do that soon
Well, yeah,
because
it's like
there's more.
when Isaac was born, the angel told his mother that he was going to be born on a moed,
Yeah,
which is a feast day.
yeah. And you look at all those people. You look
oh,
at
what do
Adam and
I,
Eve.
the people that are on here, what do I say? I mean, I'm serious.
Oh.
People have no
Okay,
idea. And I'm
But
like,
you don't have to answer those
Sandy,
questions.
ask them how long soon is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they say
Sandy,
that
He's
God,
coming
God,
soon. How soon is a
Well,
very interesting word. How
yeah.
long is soon?
they say
When the-
God tells you and we will know exactly when. And they seem to have proof that God tells
So Sandy,
people and they're above us.
let me
They
say
know
one.
like,
Let me say one thing, Sandy, and then let Keith say something. But so when God told when God told Adam and Eve in front of Satan when this event was going to happen, that that he would send one that was going to crush his heel and etc. They expected when Cain was born that might be the one. They didn't know, They then maybe Abel and then Seth and then so God didn't. It wasn't what God wanted them to know, and what Adam believed, because it said once he heard the judgment, it said Adam then called his wife Eve, which means mother of all living. So he restored their faith that he would not leave them as orphans. He would get they lost their inheritance because they didn't have faith in his word. Have faith in my word, and I will keep my promises. So all that we can do, because otherwise you're getting into adding and taking away things that we don't have the ability to do, is say, why can't we celebrate the fact that we have all these resources and all these things from our perspective to say with such certainty that Jesus is returning, and with a lot of certainty that in our generation, and can't we focus on studying that out or doing whatever, as
well, I
opposed to
tell them
all
my
this
dad always
frivolous
said,
arguments
we need to
about
study, we'll know where we are. When things happen, we'll know where we are. But people
yeah,
seem to jump ahead and say, no, God will tell us. He always does. That's what we're for to. And I'm like, what? You think we're going to go out and tell people, hey, he's coming on 2027? then you look like an idiot when it doesn't happen. They've done it so many times with even people that come to us. It's like,
Yes,
you
they have.
guys stop it.
We'll know it's
This,
close, but the Bible says we'll not know the day nor the hour, but we will know it's close.
Well, the
well,
day or the
well,
hour is different. They say we'll know the year. And I'm like, not until certain things happen, like possibly a
Yeah.
Sunday law. Well, 3.5 years, we can kind of figure that one. But other than
Keith has
that,
something to say. Go ahead, Keith.
Christ was very specific to the 4 disciples that was with him because they wanted signs. He went and listed all of these signs, and then he said, this generation, what generation? The generation that sees those signs,
Exactly.
they will know. And so that, and what those signs did not include the Jubilee years or any of that stuff.
No.
That is the stuff that people need to pay a close attention to, is the signs that he gave. When you see these signs, this generation, now some of those signs happened a long time ago. This is why I say that whole chapter is going to be repeated right at the time of the end.
right.
Here's what my whole thing is about, Sandy, and if anyone is confused about my ministry or what I'm trying to accomplish, is that I look at the calling of that generation in the book of Revelation, knowing that's Christ's instruction, and I look at the calling to with that, and how Jesus referred to himself as Son of Man, and how the calling of Ezekiel, and I showed you before, but let's just compare them side by side for one more time here. If I can go back to that slide. I think I have it in here, but just going to double check. Might just be going back and forth between these two slides. Let me just. Okay, so here's when Jesus said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because He has anointed me to set the captives free." Oh shoot.
Well,
Anyway,
while you're looking for that, Brent, I had a conversation with my dad. He was a farmer, about the Jubilees. And he says, well, here's, every 7th year we rotate the crops.
yeah,
The 50th year, the land, like you said on there, is fallow. It's not to grow anything.
yeah,
But every 7th year, it's not that the land rests every 7th. He says, what we do is we do crop rotation.
yeah. Well, so let's say, well, what is our purpose? So when God called Ezekiel, and son of man, whatever, it said, and just let's just really consider this. But pretend God's talking to us right now. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not rebellious like the rebellious house. So he's sending them, Ezekiel, to his own nation. Open thy mouth and eat what I give you. And when I looked, behold, an hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was written therein. And he spread it before me. So he opened up the scroll before Ezekiel. And it was written on the inside and the outside. So just like the covenant, inside and outside. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, eat what thou findest. Eat this roll, and then go speak unto the house of Israel. Then I did eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey, so for its sweetness. So he spoke it. He spoke the future. He spoke with God, but he first had to digest it himself. He had to fully consume it himself. So the 7th generation says, and the voice which I heard from heaven spoken to me. And remember, John is the one that is speaking to, and he's writing all this stuff down. But he's speaking for the generation, the 7th generation. Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel, which stands. So it's open before him too. It's not closed, which stands upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went up to the angel, and I said unto him, give me the little book. And he said unto him, take it and eat it up. And so what happens? He took it out of the angel's hand, ate it up. And then again, in his mouth, it was sweet as honey too. But when he had eaten it, it was bitter in his belly because, like Daniel said, that he was sick many days when he realized the time was far off. John was sick as well when John, way back in the first century AD, realized the time was far off. It was still sweet in his mouth, but he became, sick in there. But he said, then he said unto me, thou must prophesy again. And remember, he's talking to John, who survived and lived till this point in time, 95 AD. He'd seen the world evangelized. He'd seen all the disciples, how they were martyred, he'd seen the resurrection. He'd seen all this stuff. He's the last surviving apostle. And it says you must do it one more time, again, before peoples, nations, tongues. So the first part of it is digest this book. And the second part of it is then go speak. And so the very first sentence of the next chapter says, observe the tabernacle. Go back and observe the tabernacle. So what I feel like in this ministry, when people say, well, and why I try to avoid these dates and times and stuff like that sometimes is that everybody wants to rush to the end and rush to the date of his return, blah, blah, blah. And I've always resisted that. And I've never given people all that I have because I don't want them to use it in the wrong way. And go, oh, yeah, well, I can prove this and I can prove that. We're just looking at the tabernacle right now, and we've only done 8 or 9 studies or whatever. There's so much more to study out and to see the beauty of it all. And I want to fully digest that so that is our armor and that is our spiritual food. We'll be able to share with others. This is part of the last calling. Like, well, I don't believe the Bible is true. Well, let me show you this, and let me show you that, and let me explain this to you or that to you. But we're so worried about, people get so egotistical about their ministries and about this and that, and so I want to avoid all that and just say that, we're just trying to digest this scroll that God's opened up for the seventh generation to see more clearly than any generation beforehand what's already been set there in the tabernacle since Moses, over 3,450 years ago. Moses was given this pattern. It was some shepherd in the middle of the desert, and he wouldn't know when Elijah is going to be born or that Elijah is going to be born or when Jesus was going to be born. He couldn't have possibly made this tabernacle prophetic. He couldn't have made it possibly that, okay, so this many years from now, so I'm going to make these 46 boards and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. He was told, don't deviate from that pattern. And once you fully observed it, my presence will be with you. And I will be with my people. And I think once we fully observe this pattern in the last generation and use that to evangelize the world, that is part of God's last call. So I'm more concerned about the things we haven't seen yet. I'm only doing this little question and answer here because, Sandy and I talked and you wanted to kind of address this 2027 thing. And we were just about to start, and we talked about the Day of Atonement, and we talked about, the resurrection of Jesus in the 4,140 years. And people are going to argue with me about that till the day I die, or they die. But they're not going to engage me in the argument because, okay, if you want to be right, go ahead. I'm just showing you, here's how I got to the number so that people that want to listen will know that these same numbers are in the tabernacle all the way through it, And so, but it in some ways, like I said, it doesn't matter because 4,000 years times 1.5 is 6,000 years, and that's the end of the fourth day and the end of the sixth day. And it would make sense when you think that it's about sin and the man of sin is 66666, that the sin offering would be 66666 of the royal offering, because that is when God took care of the sin problem, and that was not on the sixth day, it was on the fourth day or the end of the fourth day. You can say end of the fourth day, beginning of the fifth day, whatever. End of the sixth day, beginning of the seventh day. But but I really believe with all my heart that beginning around mid 1800s, that we began the seventh day, and that it's a short period of time. It's just like it always has been when Enoch was born. It's
Argue
like,
with that But Mrs. White did say, what year was that, you guys, where she said, he could have come, but they rejected something, so like the
Yeah.
18 something, he could have come, and then she had, it was like 3-year thing, so, you know,
That was
it.
it, that 1888.
Yeah, and it started the 7,000, so that could have been, and we
What,
had
what
to
about
wait.
1888, Keith?
That was in 1888 that he could have, she said he could have came.
And
Yeah,
I
well,
forgot
that's interesting.
what she was saying, but it was sometime before that, that he could have come. But for what they did and stuff, so it's very fascinating, and I agree with the
Well,
27.
what's interesting, Keith, is that 1888 is exactly 6,000 observed years.
Is that something? See?
But, she never explained anything. That's just, it was a, thing that she
Yeah.
wrote,
Well,
He
she
could
said
have-
that when she talked about the 4,000 and the 6,000, like for example, when she said 4,000 years they'd spent, and it's true. It's like saying the 400 versus the 430. Your descendants be there 400 years versus the 430. If they were there 430 years, to the day, then obviously, yeah, they were there 400 years. They're there a little bit more than 400 years, but they were there 400 years. So she says most times 4,000 years, had passed or whatever. There's only one time when it could look like it's saying, very specifically, 4,000 years, but most of them are fairly general. When it comes to the 6,000 years, they're a lot more general. There's about 6,000 years, or, and one time she said when 6,000 years have passed. So she kind of changes a little bit, between 1888 and 1915 to a little bit longer of a time frame, but she doesn't explain herself. She never
Right.
says exactly this or exactly that. That's other people saying, trying to make it look like that. But the long story short is that when you see that um, uh, that that 4 is 2/3 of 6. That's it. 2/3 of 6, and we know 6 is the number of a man, and that the number of the man is going to be over when the number of God kicks in. So the number of man 6 is over either already or in the next few years. Then the number of man is over. It's now the number of God, which I believe, was mid 1800s. But it doesn't matter getting all this argument. 4 is 2/3 of 6. And what's 2/3? 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. That's it. What's 1/3? 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. How many years Jesus? 33 years, for his time. Why was it 33 years? Well, that's 1/3, not 2/3. So anyway, I just believe that we're in a very special time, that things have happened to God's clock all the way. They'll continue to happen. I agree that beginning 2027 on, spiritual events, profound, unlike 2,000-year type events, could begin to happen, will begin to happen at some point. Jesus will return in that period, and I believe that we're supposed to study and digest that book and keep looking and keep praying and keep watching. Because if we had all the answers today, and I said, okay, Sandy, set your clock for uh, midnight on 2031, because that's when you're going home, your work could be finished. It's like, okay, well, what do I do between now and then? Even with the disciples, they walked with him for 3.5 years. He didn't reveal till near the end that he'd be leaving them. That they're, because they couldn't abhor it. They couldn't, so we know so much, and we know so many profound, wonderful things, and we don't need to argue about this or that, and we don't need to set dates and do whatever. But we can say, look, we believe that, you know, that Jesus will return, and we will do exactly what God has always said.
It's
Happen to
getting
believe that it's going to be in this generation.
things that are happening.
You see?
Ron, did you have a question? Your hand's been up.
Yeah, you mind if I read a statement from early writings? Just a short sentence.
Sure, I can you speak just a little bit louder. I've got a air conditioner going on here. Sorry.
All right. I heard the voice of God like many waters, which gave us the day and hour of Jesus' coming. The living saints, 144,000 in number, knew and understood the voice, while the wicked thought it was thunder and an earthquake. So I just thought that was an answer to your
Yeah.
earlier question.
Well, that'll happen.
Yeah, but she didn't say when that would happen.
No.
But think
And
about
it was
this for a
God
minute.
that announced it, not a prophet or a man.
Yeah.
But we are to be looking. We are to
But
be
think
searching.
think about this for a second. How many hours in 6 days? 144. 144 times 1,000 is 144,000. That's the end of the 6 days. I'm telling you, boys. It's just
Yeah, and
there's a reason why it's 144,000.
the 1,000 years in heaven, I believe that's when the 144,000 are going to go over every case on this planet. And it may not take 1,000 years. I believe it'll come to an end when they're finished with their work. God knows how long it'll be.
Yeah. Well, you think about uh, how long did Adam live, or how long did like the longest living was Methuselah, and each one of those is considered a day with the Lord. The day of Noah, the day of Enoch, the day of Moses, whatever. They're all different days and they're all different generations. The longest living one was 969 years. The shortest was Enoch because he took him. But they're not. Moses wasn't, or Noah. I always look for like Noah. He was born kind of a weird, like 1,056 years from Adam. Like it's just kind of like and he was the 10th generation, right? So it's just over 1,000 years. So anyway, I think we can end this with prayer, and just wanted to say that we had time to talk about more. We've only just started to talk about the return part, the crown of it, and there's so much to share. Several presentations just on that, but I think the key message is I'm not going to sit and get into debates with people about, well, I'm not going to listen to his ministry because he's off by 140 years. That's pretty narrow, and if you want that, then just shut it off, and go your own way. And because I'm not interested in arguing about years and times, or I can justify everything I have. I could sit down and I sat down with a pastor for 8 hours, going through every scripture, and they couldn't find one error, and at the end, it didn't change his mind. It was just like, well, I don't want you to talk about this anyway, So it's just something where people have their own egos and their own pride. All I want to know is the truth. I want to search for the truth. Nobody wants to follow a fable or whatever. Peter says we didn't construct some fable, when we saw the Lord glorified, but the sure word of prophecy is even, something to take heed of, take great heed of. And when I first saw this pattern 20 years ago in a very private way, where I was just wondering, whether Jesus was the truth, whatever. I knew, like, I knew then that the time was near, type thing. But I've just had such a blessing going back over and over and over again to, what does this mean? What does that mean? Like, when they're talking about Son of Man, look over here, look over there. That's how I feel like my whole experience has been with this tabernacle, observing it. It's like all of a sudden your heart starts to burn. You go, wow, look at this. Incredible. Like, look at when Elijah was like, so when we start looking at the patriarchs and when they were born, and why, exactly like Keith mentioned, when Isaac was born, and when this, and when you examine that pattern, or for example, the pattern of the flood, how many days it was, like, before the flood started, and then you compare that to the tabernacle, they all are the same pattern. And what we will get to sometime in the near future is why the feast days, the 7 feast days, are exactly on the days they're on, because it's part of this exact same pattern. But you got to kind of work through the foundation of first and go, okay, so the Day of Atonement was 189 days past, and 190th is the Day of Atonement. Well, that's 6.3 months, and how much difference between that and the next feast, and it's amazing because it all ends up being like you just see over and over again that everything God gave us to observe. If He said observe the 7th day, you wouldn't recognize in that pattern why things happen on that time. Like it's the 6.9th observed or the 7th prophetic that those things happen. But if you had no concept of the Sabbath, it wouldn't mean anything. Like it wouldn't mean like you wouldn't be able to. All you'd be able to say is, oh, there's some sort of pattern here. But it wouldn't be, oh, this happened on the Sabbath, this happened on the Jubilee, this happened on the 7th times 7, this happened. And when you get into it, it's just so amazing how God never gave us anything to observe that wasn't fundamental to, how our plan of redemption was, or wasn't good for us, like observe this day, because this day is not going to change, anyway.
Proves the Bible. It proves God.
Yeah. Did you want to finish to say something, Keith? And then,
Good.
okay. Do you mind if I just say a prayer to,
Okay.
Our Father in heaven, holy is your name. May your kingdom come, and may your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Please give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And please lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, and power, and glory, forever and ever. In Jesus' name, amen. And Father, I just want to thank you for this time we've had together, this time. I want to thank you for BET and the ministry to be able to talk together despite any differences we might have, to be able to talk about what we agree on and the things we agree on, and things that you're showing us, Father, and just ask you to bless the hearts of people that have watched or people that may watch down the road, and that we all would share together the glory that you bring, Father, and we would all look forward to your soon return. Father, thank you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you for coming on here, and everybody
Yeah.
for your questions and comments and stuff. There was, I know there's people watching on Roku. I had some text me, and there's 3 or 4 showing on YouTube, but people probably go back and watch it
Shortly.
after it's done.
Yeah. Well,
But
we'll like I said, that I'll talk to you tomorrow, Sandy, and figure out plans from there. But I yeah, I mean, I just want to keep going and get, we need to it's like a transition point now. It sort of gets a little deeper, but so I'm going to go a little slower with, kind of one thing and study that out really well. And then the next thing, study that out really well, because I've been trying to kind of just give an overview, but now the blessing will come and looking at things a little closer. So, but that's why I want to have some things in writing that people can have the charts or the timelines, and it's so much easier when you can just have it in front of you and go, okay, here's here's the scripture, or here's the date, or here's the number.
yeah.
Anyway, bless everybody. We'll see you Sabbath.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank